So you've read the video title. We know why you're here. You're stressed. Maybe you have an exam coming up soon. Maybe your boss is being mean to you. You're acting a little weird. You're acting a little kooky. But the question is, are you just mildly stressed or are you fully crashing out? Well, not to worry. I'm here to tell you. Are you crashing out? This is a full comprehensive guide. I made you a flowchart as usual. We're gonna run through 4 different types of crashing out because we all cope differently. So the 4 different types of crash out, right? There's gonna be 2 scales, so it's kind of like a compass. One end of the spectrum is gonna be passive decay crash out, and the opposite of that is gonna be social performative crash out. So those are 2 ends of one of the axes. The other axis is gonna go from chaotic outburst crash out, and the opposite of that is premeditated crash out. So we're going to touch on each of these in turn. So the sliding scale of crashing out is going to go from 0 to 5. As I said before, 0 is going to be regular, like no crashing out symptoms at all, right? And then for levels 1 to 3, 3 being the worst out of this bit, that's like not technically crashing out yet. Like it's still salvageable. You're still in like the coping phase, but like as you go from like 1 to 2 to 3, it's just getting a little bit messier. When you hit level 4, this is when I think you've like officially crossed the line. Your actions are no longer coping mechanisms, but they're probably self-sabotaging, they're harmful, or they're damaging. And then by level 5, you're like deeply like you're crashing out. You know, at level 5, you're crashing out, active collapse, severe consequences to your actions. You're it's over for you. You're off the deep end. Okay, so first we're going to talk about passive decay crash out. Here, starting at 0, we're going to go up to 1. The first stage above your regular stress levels of passive decay crashing out is indulgence, okay? So this might happen when you're just a little bit stressed, right? So you're just mildly indulging. So some of the things that you might be doing, you just might be doom scrolling on your phone a lot, but you're still texting your friends. You might be watching a lot of comfort shows, getting takeout a lot. So one way of explaining this, right, is that this isn't actually bad behavior, but you could make the argument here that you just need a micro escape. You're just trying to reduce overstimulation. Maybe you're doing too many things at once. Your day is stressful, right? You just want to have a mild distraction, but ultimately it's not that bad. You're just lightly avoiding your tasks. So I'd say at this level, right, it's not crashing out. Like it's not even that bad. Like, yeah, you're not operating at peak levels right now, but this is firmly, in my opinion, not crashing out. You're just a little more passive than usual. You don't really have all of your usual energy, and that's totally fine. Okay, so the second stage up from that is retreat. So again, you're getting a little bit more stressed out. Maybe you're just withdrawing a little bit more. So some of the symptoms of stage 2 of passive decay is you stay in bed all day, you skip minor obligations, and you're muting group chats. So one of the positive ways of viewing this behavior is that you could argue that this still provides solitude to process and recover and think about your emotions. And again, this is just a temporary disconnect to repair yourself, your emotional state, etc., etc. But at this stage, obviously, because it's one above stage 1, there is more of a risk of genuine social disconnect, and there's also like early isolation patterns that are kind of happening. Going one up from that, right? So we're inching closer to like crashing out, okay? So from stage 2 to stage 3, I think the difference here is that there's more disassociation. So at this stage, some of the symptoms might be staring blankly, letting your administrative or your chores kind of pile up, and you're also just like ignoring your needs. Maybe your house is getting messier and messier. You've not taken the bin out in like a couple days. You know, like it's getting harder to argue about positive effects from this behavior. You could argue that this is still just like mental white noise, right? Maybe it offers like a brief reprieve, but it's honestly, this type of behavior like barely functions anymore as any type of positive reprieve. At this stage, there's a way higher risk of a loss of agency, and there's also an erosion of your sense of self, and you're also probably neglecting some of your responsibilities, maybe to yourself, maybe to your parents, to your family, etc. So going up from number 3 to stage 4, I would say now you're probably starting to crash out. Like I think that like now we're inching into, yeah, you're crashing out, you know? Okay, so from stage 3 to stage 4, I'd say that like the verb or like the action that makes you go from stage 3 to stage 4 is abandon. So at stage 4, you're probably dropping your hygiene, like you're probably not really upkeeping maintenance regularly, your room is getting dirtier, you're not showering regularly, you're probably abandoning a lot more tasks, and you're probably giving up on a lot more of your obligations. So again, because I'm trying to give you like a positive outlook on some of this behavior, so it's not just like bad, at this stage, you can argue that because it's getting a little worse, this will force you to kind of like eventually reset via hitting rock bottom, which doesn't sound great, but like potentially positive. But I'd say that at this stage, there's going to be a high emotional cost regardless of whether or not you recover from it. I'd say there's a much higher severe chance of you going into a self-sabotage cycle. You're probably cutting off essential support systems, and it's probably much harder to get back to a regulated sense of self. Okay, so going up from that again, we're now moving fully into the final stage, and I would say right now, you're probably fully crashing out, you're probably definitionally crashing out, and the way to move from stage 4 to stage 5 is just full isolation. By the way, if you've watched some of my other videos and you've noticed that this one is different because I've actually been like live making the flowchart, it's because this flowchart is being done on today's sponsor, XP Pen. So XP Pen has very nicely sent me one of their new tablets, the Magic Notepad. So I've been using the notepad to make these silly graphs and like take notes, and I've been really enjoying it. And when I'm using it, it actually does feel different from a regular tablet. And that's because the XP Pen has a 3-in-1 color paper-like display, and it comes with a new X3 Pro Pencil 2, which has like almost ridiculous levels of pressure. There's like 16,000 pressure levels, which is crazy, and the refresh rate is really smooth, so it actually does feel like you're like using a notebook, like a physical notebook. There's like no lag. It's basically like a digital notepad designed for people whose brains are everywhere. If you like making huge diagrams, if you like just scribbling your thoughts out, maybe a notebook is too restrictive because it's got, you know, it's like you have to adhere to certain size constraints. So this is excellent for if you really want to let your thoughts wander, if you want to be creative, if you want to just crash out on tablet. So like me, you might enjoy the XP Pen Magic Notepad. Whether you're note-taking, doodling, drawing out your crash out diagram for your YouTube video, or you're making like passive-aggressive lists of who's wronged you, this tablet handles all of that. It's smooth, it's precise, but it doesn't have like the annoying, like glassy feeling of drawing on like a different tablet, which is why I personally don't have one of those, because I've tried it and it feels weird. Like, I don't like it. This feels really natural. It feels like I'm writing on actual paper. Thank you XP Pen again for sponsoring this video. If you want to check out the Magic Notepad or any of their other creative tools, then you can check out the link in the description below. Thank you XP Pen, and now back to the video. So at this stage in the graph, you're probably like emotionally frozen. There's probably no communication, and there's probably also like total withdrawal, probably with your emotions, but also just with like the wider community, the wider society. So at this point, there's almost like no restorative potential left. I don't think there's any tangible positive benefit to any of this behavior. You're fully crashing out. There's probably going to be severe alienation, and most likely there will be long-term harm to your relationships. Hopefully at this stage you try and get some help. Hopefully the people around you are still supportive and you're able to kind of dig yourself out of it. But that's kind of the sliding scale for any type of passive decay crashing out. Okay, so now we covered passive decay crashing out, which I would say in a very simple way is like you getting more and more into yourself, like more and more into your shell. So it's like very much digging deep crashing out. So now we're gonna do the opposite of that, right? So like while that one went inward, we're gonna now do like outward external crashing out. Okay, so this is social / performative crashing out. So again, we're gonna start at 0, which is like normal stress regulation. You're not crashing out at all. You're not stressed, or you're able to like regulate yourself healthily. So the first stage away from that is to start venting. Okay, so in stage 1 of social / performative crashing out, some of the actions that you might be doing, you might be like tweeting vaguely, you know, doing like that passive aggressive type of tweet about, oh, I feel so sad today, etc., etc. You know people that have done this. You've seen the Instagram stories about this. Sad Instagram stories, sharing sad songs on your Instagram, and you know that some people will kind of pick up on the emotion. You kind of hope people will be like, oh, what's wrong? Why are you so sad? You might be lightly oversharing. You might be fishing for sympathy in private chats or like over DM, or like, you know, fishing sympathy with people that you know. So during this first stage, I would say that you're not crashing out per se. I would say a lot of this is still like okay, like regular behavior, you know, because it's not that bad to like vent to your friends. It's not that bad to listen to sad music and post it on Instagram, right? There's nothing wrong with that. I'd say a lot of this, it probably also like invites social validation, and also if you have caring friends, and that can reconnect you to your friend circle, which is actually a really good thing. Venting also relieves mild tension, which is also good. All in all, I'd say not that big of a deal if you do some of these things. Obviously, we're gonna discuss some of like the possible negative repercussions, which is that it could cause mild reputational risk. It might be slightly cringe. This is a me issue, which I think like everywhere, I think everything is cringe. It's not that big a deal, obviously. And again, there's like a potential for misinterpretation from people that don't know you that well. If you're like posting a lot of vaguely sad quotes on your Instagram, people just might be like, oh, okay, I guess she's going through something. So it's more of like a mild reputational thing. If you are not self-conscious, then it's not a big deal. Okay, so moving on from stage 1 to stage 2, so where like things are getting like a little more serious, you're a little bit more stressed out. I would say the behavior that defines stage 1 and stage 2, the difference is that stage 2 is more attention seeking. So in stage 2, I'd say some of the behaviors that are to look out for if you're in stage 2, more passive aggressive online posting. There might be needier and longer rants in your group chats or in your DMs. At this stage, you might also just be venting to like strangers, so like maybe you're on Twitter, you're DMing your Twitter mutuals that you don't know, like, you know, like strangers are like posting on Reddit so that like random people can see it. Again, the positive interpretation of this is that this can still bring support or connection if people respond positively to you online. It might make you feel a little bit better, but at this stage, it's a little worse than stage 1. Most likely, this is going to erode social trust. It might tire your social circle, and it can also foster shallow validation cycles. Okay, so one up from number 2 to number 3, you're crashing, you're inching closer and closer to crashing out. Okay, this is like escalation stage, right? By the way, if you're interested in getting a PDF of this beautiful chart that you saw me do, you can check out my Ko-fi page. If you're interested in the flowcharts of any of my other videos, for example, like like how to tell someone likes you, like how to tell, you know, like, am I in a situationship? All of those flowcharts, they're all on my Ko-fi page. Just check out the Ko-fi page. Yeah, thank you. So at this stage, some of the behaviors you might be exhibiting, you might be going on like Instagram Live to like explain drama. So you're like being like a little less subtle about it, right? It's getting more and more express. Like it's becoming more and more like plausible deniability is kind of like plummeting down the hill. You might be doing public call-out posts. You might be tweeting. You might be posting on your Instagram stories. You might also be sharing private DMs or like screenshots with other people. So you're like really telling people like explicitly what's going on in your life. Again, just to give you the benefit of the doubt, maybe some of this is not that bad. You could say possible good, probably not good, but like possible good effects of this type of behavior. You could say it's like short-term catharsis for you, mostly just for you, but I'm not gonna lie, it's not really worth it because from like doing this type of behavior, most likely you're burning bridges, you're tarnishing your reputation at least a little bit, like something is getting tarnished. Most likely, I'd say there's more negative repercussions. There might be public backlash, people might like isolate you socially, especially if you're sharing private messages publicly. It spreads conflict, obviously, across your network, your social network, your community. And now we're gonna go from stage 3 to stage 4, and like by stage 4, I'd say people are gonna start saying you're crashing out, like you might be crashing out. So from stage 3 to stage 4, this is what I call announcing. So that's the defining difference between these two. So like stage 4, you're probably doing like public guilt or shame posts. So like these are like posts that are like live publicly, like trying to like name and shame people, okay? You're like breaking down in front of like a live Instagram audience, you know, you're deliberately provoking reactions from people. Again, benefit of the doubt, but the plausible deniability is pretty bad. We could say momentarily this gives you the sense of control, right? Like maybe it makes you feel like you're in power if you're naming and shaming people online. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but maybe it makes you feel good, but 100% it's gonna like deepen your shame and the alienation that you feel to the rest of your community. So yeah, bad parts, major reputational fallout, there's public embarrassment, and it also invites a lot of harmful attention. And in the final stage of social/performative crashing out, there's no doubt about it, you're crashing out, you're going crazy. This is full meltdown, okay? This is full meltdown shit. At this stage, you're probably dropping names and receipts, like explicitly telling people exactly what's happening. You're probably crying, screaming, throwing up on live stream, you know, Instagram lives. You're going crazy, publicly destroying your connections and your reputation, and at this point you don't really care, or like you're like crashing out so bad that like you can't even rationally think straight. At this point there's really no real regulating effect left. You're probably spiraling fully into destruction. At this stage it's pretty bad. There's probably severe self-sabotage, permanent reputational damage, and it definitely damages your relationship and your community. So those are the stages of social/performative crashing out. So as I said before, that's like the opposite of like going inward. You can also crash outward, okay? 1 to 3, you know, like vaguely tweeting, being a little passive aggressive online. In my opinion, it's a little cringe, but also I'm a YouTuber, so I can't really say anything. It's not really crashing out. Once it gets to like the explicit once you start like really like emoting like true like rage online, yeah, I think you're crashing out. I hope you get better. Like I hope things are fine, you know, like just yeah, it'll be okay. Cool, so now we did like the social axis of the two different types of crashing out. We're now going to talk about the other axis of crashing out. So while this axis is about like how external / internal the crashing out is, like how it exhibits, this axis is going to talk about like intentionality, okay? So like on one end of the axis, it's going to be like fully like impulse, like not planned at all, like a crime of passion, you know, like a crashing out of passion. And then the other end of that same axis, it's going to be like fully premeditated shit, okay? Like you plan that shit. You were like, I want to ruin someone's life and I'm gonna plan it out. Full mens rea, okay? Like mens rea scale. So we're first gonna discuss crashing out, but like on impulse, you know? Like without any planning, it's like chaotic outburst, impulsive external collapse crashing out. As usual, we're gonna start from 0 and we're gonna start moving that way all the way to the most severe type of crashing out. Okay, so stage 1 in this, the verb I would use to describe this is jolt. Basically, some of the behaviors might be, you might be going on an unplanned late night drive, you might be like rearranging your furniture in your room at 2 a.m, you might be laughing, screaming into your pillow, you know, like slight impulsive behaviors that are like not really bad, they don't really do much of anything, but it might just get your like heart pumping a little bit, you know, it might just like make you feel a little like more excited, just gets you out of your head, shakes up your routine a little bit. At this point, there's no crashing out, right? This is like a safe energy release. It just stirs movement and it just relieves pent-up pressure in your life, in your brain. Perfectly normal, perfectly good, no crashing out. You could argue that, you know, this behavior is like a slight disruption to your sleep schedule, especially if you're like, you know, going on impromptu, I don't know, 7-Eleven trips. But to be honest, there's like no real harm to anything. Might just be tired, but other than that, perfectly fine. I'd say probably necessary just to feel alive in some way. Okay, so moving on to the next stage from that, the second stage is reactive. So at this stage, you're slightly more stressed than previously. Some of the behaviors that you might be exhibiting, you might be snapping at others for small things or like things that usually wouldn't irritate you so much. You're like getting more annoyed than you usually would. You might be doing things like listening to like really loud music, blaring music, like rage cleaning. I wish I would rage clean, or like driving just like aimlessly, walking aimlessly around your neighborhood. Again, like impulsive things where you're like, usually you would plan these things out or you would do them like slower, but now you just kind of have to like do them in like a really, you know, like you just have to like do something immediately. Again, this isn't really crashing out because I can see how this is like empowering in the moment, and it also releases a lot of the tension in your nervous system, so probably it's still good for you. At this stage, it's a little more serious because if you're doing a lot of like reactive if you're snapping at people for like minor things, it can erode some of the trust in your relationships, and it might also cause like accidental harm or regret, especially if you're like, I don't know, like running around your block listening to heavy metal music. Like, I don't know, like don't hurt yourself. Okay, so moving one stage away from that, you're getting more stress, right? The stress is like, it's cooking, okay? You're like a pot and you're like simmering a little more. So at this stage, I would say that what defines it is that you are getting impulsive. So some of the behaviors are a little more, they're getting more drastic, okay? So some of the behaviors, punching walls, throwing things, sending angry texts to people, if you rage quit your job or your friends or relationships or like opportunities, like impulsively being like, oh, I give up on this thing, I would say you're in stage 3. Again, to give like a positive interpretation to some of these behaviors, you could argue that this still gives you like a momentary illusion of control, but most likely it's going to be followed by guilt or regret. And at this stage, the negative consequences are getting worse. So for example, you could say that this is like escalating self-sabotage. And at this stage, you're probably damaging the relationships you have with people, especially if you're acting some type of way, but also you might literally be damaging property if you're, you know, like just reacting physically. Okay, so adding pressure from that, we're now going to move into stage 4, which is spiraling. So at this stage, yeah, you're starting to crash out, motherfucker. You're starting to crash out. So some of the behaviors in stage 4, this is when you like consciously start acting out or like spiraling, or like you can feel yourself do it in the moment, and you're also just like seeking drama and chaos to feel alive, right? You know that you're doing risky behavior, and like that's what makes it stage 4, which people are gonna start saying that you're crashing out. Again, to give you like the plausible deniability or like, you know, benefit of the doubt, some of the good things that can happen from this behavior, even though they're getting less and less. You could argue that you like feel alive in the moment, but I would say ultimately there's really no restorative effect left to this type of behavior. Most likely there's gonna be like a really high chance of regret, and there's probably gonna be lasting consequences again to your mental health, to your relationships, to your property, the property of other people. And now we're gonna move on to stage 5, which is just full meltdown. So at this stage, you're crashing out, clinically crashing out. Behaviors, you're probably screaming at other people, you're probably destroying property, and you're just having like full system overload, okay? At this stage, it's hard to argue that there's like any positive effect left. Like pretty much all of the regulation is gone. And at this stage, it's almost definitely harmful to yourself and to other people, and there's a real danger of injury, isolation, and also just like general crisis events, you know? So those are all the stages leading to chaotic outburst crashing out. So like probably like a traditional sense of like crashing out, in the sense that you just like suddenly something happens and you just like fully go apeshit, right? So, like that's one end of the type of crashing out. So now we're going to discuss premeditated crashing out. So while the last one discussed like impulse, you know, like a crime of passion, we're now going to discuss more strategic crashing out. Like you're kind of more conscious about your actions, right? But like this is still a type of crashing out, so we're going to talk about it. So again, we're going to start at 0, which is normal stress regulation, not crashing out, very zen, very normal. The first stage away from this is what I call asserting. So this might happen if like someone's irritated you, or like someone's done something that like doesn't sit well with you, right? So at this stage, you're probably just like calmly setting boundaries. You might be calling someone out in private, or like writing an unsent angry letter just to like vent, let your emotions out a little bit, but you're not really sending it out. You're not really doing anything. I would say that this is actually a good thing to learn, right? How to set your boundaries. That's all good. Asserting is a good thing. So this is healthy boundary setting, right? And it clarifies your needs and it just restores your sense of agency. Ultimately, I think this is very healthy. This is a very good thing. You might argue that here there's like slight tension and like discomfort, but ultimately there's no lasting harm, and I think this is perfectly normal. Moving on from stage 1 to stage 2 is maybe they're irritating you a little bit more, okay? Maybe you're just like a little bit more high strung. At this point, I would say that you are pushing back. So some of the behaviors at this stage are, you might be sending a sharply worded text knowing it'll hurt this person's feelings, or like knowing that this will sting. There might be more direct confrontation with purpose, and you might also start strategically cutting people off if you don't like them, or like they did something that hurts you. Again, at this stage, I'd say there are still like a lot of positive effects that can come from this behavior. For example, it probably enforces your self-respect and it rebalances any uneven power dynamics if you use this wisely, if you're not really intentionally trying to hurt someone's feelings. But obviously there's a little bit more of a risk of social rupture, and also possibly it's like hardening resentment that people have towards you, and if there's any tension, it could be escalating that. Okay, so now we're gonna move slightly further. Maybe it's really getting to you. We're gonna move to stage 3, which is when the premeditation is gonna start, okay? There's gonna be some planning now. So at this stage, some of the behaviors that you might be doing, you might be actively planning to expose someone's mistakes. Like if someone wronged you, you're like actively trying to like out them in some way, okay? Maybe you're gathering evidence to like call someone out, you know, like maybe you're trying to build a case against someone. You might also be waiting for the right moment to punish or confront this person. So again, because I'm trying to do the thing where I give you like a charitable interpretation of your actions, getting a little bit harder, maybe you could say that this offers like a fleeting sense of control, but ultimately this definitely feeds a type of toxic obsession. You really shouldn't be trying to premeditate outing someone's mistakes. The negative interpretation of this would be that obviously this consumes a lot of your literal and like mental energy, and it also amplifies grudges, and it risks major backlash, both like reputationally and also within your community. Okay, so moving one further into premeditation zone. So stage 4 is fully, you're doing a strategic takedown. Like you're planning, you know, you're cooking, you want to take this person down. So some of the behaviors here, you might be strategically turning others against this person. You might be plotting a public takedown or a humiliation attempt. At this point, you're probably crafting or like planning explicitly, how am I gonna like emotionally or socially break this person? Again, this is pretty bad, right? Like if someone saw you doing this shit, they would probably start saying that you're crashing out. Like I'm pretty sure you're crashing out. The most charitable interpretation I can have for this type of behavior, you could argue this creates like an illusion of victory, but usually this is gonna backfire. It's pretty bad. Like it looks bad. Like the optics are really bad. At this stage, there's going to be significant negative repercussions. There's going to be really bad relational fallout. There's probably going to be long-term isolation, and there's going to be moral corrosion, okay? You're going to feel your conscience is not going to be clear. There's going to be moral and ethical corrosion on your conscience. And finally, stage 5, full premeditated crash out. This is full destruction mode. So behaviors at this stage, you're fully crashing out. There's like no denying some of the behaviors. Premeditated physical confrontation. So like for example, you planned and you wanted to get into a fight. You wanted to fight this person. There might be property damage. Again, property destruction that you premeditated. You were like, I'm gonna go to this person's house and I'm gonna fuck some shit up. You're also burning bridges across multiple relationships knowingly, and you're also like totally fine with it. You're like consciously doing it. You would like actively want to do this. You might also be doing a cold or calculated dismantling of like projects or relationships. Maybe at work, you're like actively like in cold blood, like trying to take this person down. Okay, you want to take this person down a peg. There's full mens rea here. This is not a crime of passion. You did this calmly, cold-bloodedly. This is premeditated crashing out. So at this stage, there's basically no restorative effect to your behaviors. Like this is fully vengeful spiraling. There's definitely going to be long-term personal damage. There's going to be a collapse of your social or professional life, and there's also possibly legal and or safety risks if you're doing premeditated physical confrontation. So that is the final axis of crashing out, which is premeditated crashing out. So I hope this was helpful for helping you figure out what type of crashing out are you doing? Are you crashing out? So as a recap, we discussed 4 types of crashing out. We talked about the internal versus external component of like, are you crashing out inwardly? Are you crashing out externally? We also talked about how consciously you were crashing out, right? So we talked about a crime of passion. We talked about like, you know, chaotic, impulsive crashing out. And we also talked about cold-blooded, premeditated crashing out, a strategic, planned crashing out. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it informative. If you like this type of content, I basically make flowcharts for every video at this point. I do a lot of silly ones, situationships, relationships. They might be lighthearted, they might be more interesting. If you want to check out any of those, check out my other videos. Also check out my second channel, which I think I'm gonna do something different with, which I haven't planned yet, but just subscribe, okay? Like something will happen. Who the fuck knows? When will it happen? I don't know.